Thomas the tank engine was grumbling to the other engines. I spend my time pulling coaches about, ready for you to take out on journeys. The other engines laughed. Why can't I pull passenger trains too? You're too impatient, they said. You'd be sure to leave something behind. Rubbish, said Thomas. I'll show you. One night, he and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard, but he didn't get better. He felt just as bad next morning. Henry usually pulled the first train, and Thomas had to get his coaches ready. If Henry is ill, he thought, perhaps I shall pull his train. Thomas ran to find the coaches. Come along, he fussed. There's plenty of time, they grumbled. Thomas took them to the platform and wanted to run round in front at once. But his driver wouldn't let him. Don't be impatient, Thomas. Thomas waited and waited. The people got in. The conductor and station master walked up and down. The porter banged the doors, and still Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited. Sir Topham Hatt came to see what was the matter, and the conductor and station master told him about Henry. Find another engine, he ordered. There's only Thomas, they said. You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now. So Thomas ran round to the front and back down on the coaches ready to start. Let's not be impatient, said his driver. We'll wait till everything is ready. But Thomas was too excited to listen. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train, or perhaps the driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started without his coaches. As he passed the first signal tower, men waved and shouted, but he didn't stop. They're waving because I'm such a splendid engine, he thought importantly. Henry says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy. Hurry, 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 he puffed, pretending to be like Gordon. People have never seen me pulling a train before. It's nice of them to wave. And he whistled. Beep, beep. Thank you. Then he came to a signal at danger. Bother, he thought. I must stop. And I was going so nicely, too. What a nuisance signals are. He blew an angry beep, beep on his whistle. The signalman ran up. Hello, Thomas, he said. What are you doing here? I'm pulling a train, said Thomas. Can't you see? Where are your coaches, then? Thomas looked back. Why, bless me, he said, if we haven't left them behind. Yes, said the signalman. You'd better go back quickly and fetch them. Poor Thomas was so sad he nearly cried. Cheer up, said his driver. Let's go back quickly and try again. At the station, all the passengers were talking at once. They were telling Sir Topham Hatt what a bad railway it was. But when Thomas came back, they saw how sad he was and couldn't be cross. He was coupled to the train, and this time he really pulled it. Afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said, Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train, but forgot about the coaches. But Thomas had already learned not to make the same mistake again.
Thomas used to grumble in the shed at night. "I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world." The other engines didn't take much notice, for Thomas was a little engine who talked big and had a long tongue. But one night, Edward came to the shed. He was a kind engine and felt sorry for Thomas. "I've got some freight cars to take home tomorrow. If you take them instead of me, I'll push coaches in the yard." "Thank you," said Thomas. "That will be nice." Next morning, Edward and Thomas asked their drivers, and when they said yes, Thomas ran off happily to find freight cars. Now, freight cars are silly and noisy things. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they're doing. And I'm sorry to say, they play tricks on an engine who is not used to them. Edward knew all about freight cars. He warned Thomas to be careful, but Thomas was too excited to listen. The shunter fastened the coupling, and when the signal dropped, Thomas was ready. The conductor blew his whistle. "Beep, beep," answered Thomas and started off. But the freight cars weren't ready. "Oh, oh, oh, oh!" they screamed as their couplings tightened. "Wait, Thomas, wait!" But Thomas wouldn't wait. Come on, he puffed. All right, don't fuss! All right, don't fuss!" grumbled the freight cars. Thomas began to go faster and faster. "Wheesh!" he whistled as he rushed through Henry's tunnel. "Hurry, hurry!" called Thomas. He was feeling very proud of himself, but the cars grew crosser and crosser. At last, Thomas slowed down as he came to Gordon's Hill. "Steady now, steady," warned the driver as they reached the top. He began to put on the brakes. We're stopping, called Thomas. No, answered the freight cars, bumping into each other. Go on! Before the driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind them. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them from making him go too fast. Stop pushing, he hissed. But the freight cars took no notice. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. There's the station. Oh dear, what shall I do? Cried Thomas. They rattled straight through the station and swerved into the goods yard. Thomas shut his eyes. I must stop! When Thomas opened his eyes, he saw he had stopped just in front of the buffers. There, watching him, was Sir Topham Hatt. What are you doing here, Thomas? He asked. I've brought Edward's freight cars, Thomas answered. Why did you come so fast? I didn't mean to. I was pushed, said Thomas. You've got a lot to learn about freight cars, Thomas. They are silly things and must be kept in their place. After pushing them about here for a few weeks, You'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine.
Every day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the station to catch his train. "Hello," he always said to Thomas. "Don't let the silly freight cars tease you. Remember, you have an important job as a special helper in the train yard." There were lots of freight cars, and Thomas worked very hard pushing and pulling them into place. There was also a small coach and two strange things his driver called cranes. "That's the breakdown train," he told Thomas. "The cranes are for lifting heavy things, like engines and coaches and freight cars." One day, Thomas was in the yard. Suddenly, he heard an engine whistling. "Help! Help!" A freight train came rushing through, much too fast. The engine was James, and he was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire. They're pushing me, he panted. On, laughed the freight cars, still whistling, "Help, help!" Poor James disappeared. "I'd like to teach those freight cars a lesson," said Thomas the tank engine. Soon came the alarm. "James is off the line, the breakdown train, quickly!" Thomas was coupled on, and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed. He wasn't pretending to be like Gordon. He really meant it. "Bother those freight cars and their tricks. I hope poor James isn't hurt." James's driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt. "Never mind, James," they said. "It was those silly freight cars on your old wooden brakes that caused the accident." Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled away the unhurt freight cars. Oh dear, they groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. This'll teach you a lesson, he told the freight cars. And they answered, yes it will. They left the broken cars, then with two cranes they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting anxiously for them. Well, Thomas, he said, I've heard all about it and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint. And you shall have a branch line all to yourself. Oh, thank you, sir, said Thomas. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line and 2 coaches called Annie and Clarabel. He puffs proudly backwards and forwards with them all day. He is never lonely. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry, but never forgets to say poop poop, and Thomas always whistles peep peep in return.
He's a really useful engine, you know. So Topham Hatwell, he told him so. Now he's got a branch line to call his very own. He's the really useful engine we adore.
Trevor the traction engine is old-fashioned, but he doesn't care. He knows that he is really useful, like his friend Edward, the blue engine. Early one morning, Trevor was chuffing about the vicarage orchard. He had important news for Edward.
The vicar says that not all children are able to have holidays by the sea, so he's having a garden party to raise money for a seaside trip. I'm going to be the star attraction, chatted Trevor, giving rides to all the visitors. The vicar is putting up posters all about it.
I'd like to help too, sighed Edward, but without my rails, I wouldn't be much good at a garden party. It was a beautiful day, but Edward was worried. I wish there was something I could do for the party, he said. I'd like to be helpful, like Trevor. Edward's driver laughed. You're helpful in your own way, and that's on the railway. Next day, it was Trevor's turn to look disappointed. He had bad news.
The vicar's been so busy that he forgot to put up the posters. Now no one will know about the party.
But Edward had an idea. Don't worry, he said. Everything is going to be all right. Then he explained to his driver. The vicar can paste his posters on my cab and coaches, so wherever I go, they'll go too. Well done, Edward, said his driver. I'm sure Sir Topham Hatt will agree. As indeed he did. Edward steamed happily through the stations collecting his passengers. Look, they said, the vicar is holding a party. We must go to that. Later, Trevor was resting in the orchard shed when Bertie rolled by.
Hello, Trevor. Why are you dozing there like an old stick in the mud? I'm not dozing. I'm resting,
replied Trevor. Then he told Bertie about the vicar's party. I'll be there too, boasted Bertie. I'm not sure people will want to ride on an old traction engine after traveling in a smart red bus like me. The party day arrived. It had rained heavily during the night, and the orchard ground was soaked.
Rain and mud won't spoil my day, said Trevor.
No, indeed, agreed his driver. We'll stay on the road, then we won't get bogged down. Trevor was soon busy trundling up and down the quiet country lane, carrying lots of laughing children. He was just turning a corner when he heard Bertie.
Hello, old-timer. I'm taking everyone to the party. People have come from all over the island.
Trevor gave Bertie a cheerful whistle and turned back toward the orchard. Then there was trouble. Help, I'm stuck, shouted Bertie. His wheels had sunk deep in the orchard mud. Terence the tractor arrived just in time. I'm the one who has to plow fields, laughed Terence. We'd better get you out of here. Using strong ropes, Terence and Trevor pulled Bertie clear of the mud.
This will teach Bertie a thing or two,
Trevor chuffered to himself. At last, Bertie was on the road again. Thank you, Trevor. You're not a stick in the mud at all.
No,
Smiled Trevor.
but you were, just for a little while.
That evening, the vicar arrived to see Edward and his driver.
Thanks to your good idea about the posters, hundreds of people paid to come to the party. We've raised lots of money for the children.
Edward was very pleased, and Trevor fell happily asleep thinking of all the children who would now get to the seaside at last.
A brand new tank engine was racing across the island of Sodor. He was very excited, and he didn't want to be late. Right on time, said Sir Topham Hatt. Thomas and Percy looked at the big tank engine. He was very impressive. This is Arthur, said Sir Topham Hatt. He's here to shunt freight cars and pull freight. Nice to meet you, puffed Arthur politely. And he's got a spotless record, said Sir Topham Hatt. What's a spotless record? Whispered Percy. It means he's never been naughty or made a mess, replied Thomas. The three engines were soon at work. Thomas and Percy were bumping freight cars. They knew this was naughty, but they were having fun. Join in, Arthur, said Thomas. No, thank you, wheezed the new engine. He'd never been naughty before. Arthur's first job was to push a trainload of fruit to market. The troublesome truck started to sing.
Root toot toe, we wanna go. The fruit's going off 'cause you're too slow.
How rude, huffed Arthur. This gave Thomas a naughty idea. Sir Topham Hatt doesn't like the troublesome truck singing, said Thomas. You must stop them. Thank you, said Arthur. I will. Arthur was glad he could keep the troublesome trucks in order. He'll never stop the trucks from singing, laughed Thomas. Arthur chuffed cheerfully through the countryside. Soon the troublesome truck started singing again.
Chug, chug, chuff. You tug and huff, but you're so rusty you can't even puff.
Stop singing, huffed Arthur. Trucks should do as they are told. The troublesome trucks were cross. If they couldn't sing, they would teach Arthur a lesson instead.
We'll show him, they giggled. He can't push us around.
Arthur struggled over bridges. And he huffed and puffed through tunnels. He came over the top of a big hill.
You can't catch us,
Laughed the troublesome trucks.
Whee!
But there was trouble ahead. Duck had stopped at the crossing at the bottom of the hill. Arthur's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. Squashed fruit flew everywhere. Arthur was upset. His spotless record was ruined. Oh, Arthur, what a mess, puffed Thomas. Sir Topham Hatt was very annoyed. What happened here? The troublesome trucks were singing. I told them to stop, but they made me go too fast. Please, sir, it's my fault. Thomas told Sir Topham Hatt what he had done. Arthur, it's, fruitless for me to say more. But Thomas, you must help clear up this mess. Harvey arrived with the breakdown crane. He could see there was a lot of work to be done. Everyone worked hard, and Thomas took the loaded trucks away. That evening, Arthur was having the squashed fruit cleaned out of his funnel. Hello, Thomas. Arthur, I'm sorry I played a trick on you, said Thomas. Thanks for owning up to it, replied Arthur. Maybe Spotless records are made to be broken, smiled Thomas. And then mended again, finished Arthur, just like friendships.
Edward was getting old. His bearings were worn, and he clanked as he puffed along. He was taking empty cattle cars to a market town. The sun shone, birds sang. But Edward was heading for trouble. Come on, he puffed. Oh, 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 screamed the cars. Edward puffed and clanked. The cars rattled and screamed. Some cows were grazing nearby. They were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. As Edward clanked by, they broke through the fence and ran across the line. A coupling was broken, and some cars were left behind. Edward felt a jerk, but didn't take much notice. He was used to cattle cars. Bother those cars, he thought. Why can't they come quietly? He was at the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. When Gordon and Henry heard about the accident, they laughed and boasted. Fancy allowing cows to break his train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Old Toby was cross. You couldn't help it, Edward. They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are. Some days later, Gordon rushed through Edward's station. Hoop, hoop, mind the cows. Hurry, 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 puffed Gordon. Don't make such a fuss, don't make such a fuss, grumbled his coaches. A long stretch of line lay ahead. In the distance was a bridge. It seemed to Gordon that there was something on the bridge. His driver thought so too. Whoa, Gordon, he said and shut off steam. Oh, said Gordon, it's only a cow. Shoo! Shoo! He moved slowly onto the bridge, but the cow wouldn't shoo. She had lost her calf and felt lonely. Moo, she said sadly. Everyone tried to send her away, but she wouldn't go. Henry arrived. What's this? A cow? I'll soon settle her. Be off, be off. Moo, said the cow. Henry backed away nervously. I don't want to hurt her. At the next station, Henry's conductor told them about the cow and warned the signalman that the line was blocked. That must be Bluebell, said the porter. Her calf is here, looking for her mother. Percy will take her along. At the bridge, Bluebell was very pleased to see her calf again, and the porter led them away. Not a word. Keep it dark, whispered Gordon and Henry to each other. They felt rather silly, but the story soon spread. Well, 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 chuckled Edward. Two big engines afraid of a cow? Afraid? Rubbish, said Gordon. We didn't want the poor thing to hurt herself by running up against us. We stopped so as not to excite her. You see what I mean, my dear Edward? Yes, Gordon, said Edward. Gordon felt somehow that Edward saw only too well.
Molly's Special Special. It was a blustery day on the island of Sodor. Thomas was excited. He was on his way to meet a new engine called Molly. She was waiting as he pulled into the yards. Molly was bright yellow. She had great big wheels and a shiny funnel. She looked very smart. "Hello," Thomas puffed cheerfully. "Hello," Molly chuffed back. Molly looked sad. "What's the matter?" asked Thomas. "Emily laughed at me because I have to take empty freight cars to the coaling plant," Molly puffed sadly. "I want to take full freight cars like a really useful engine." This made Thomas feel sad. How can I help Molly feel important, he thought to himself. Then he saw some tarps flapping in the wind. This gave Thomas an idea. "I know what we can do," puffed Thomas. Molly reversed the empty freight cars into a siding. Thomas asked Molly's driver to cover her freight cars with the tarps. "With your cars covered up, no one will know they are empty," puffed Thomas. "We can make everyone think you're carrying a special delivery." "Then I will feel important," Molly chuffed cheerfully. Later, when Thomas saw Emily at the station, he told her all about Molly's special. "What is it?" asked Emily. "Not telling," Thomas puffed. "But it's the most special of all." And every time Thomas saw another engine, he told them all about Molly's special. Soon all the engines were talking about Molly's special. They were excited, except Gordon. "It won't be as important as my Express," Gordon huffed. "Molly's special is much more important than the Express," puffed Thomas. "And you'll see it tonight at Abbey Station." But then Thomas was worried. How can I make Molly's freight cars look even more special than Gordon's Express, he wondered. Later that evening, Thomas saw a station master lighting lanterns. This gave him another idea. "Can I borrow your lanterns?" Thomas puffed to the station master. "Of course," the station master replied. Soon, Thomas's trucks were filled with the lanterns, and he puffed away to find Molly. Soon, Molly's freight cars were decorated with the beautiful lanterns. She was taking the cars to the coaling plant for a very important job. "Your freight cars look very special now," puffed Thomas. "You must go through Abbey Station. Lots of engines will be there to see you." The lanterns on Molly's freight cars twinkled like stars in the night. When Thomas and Molly arrived at Abbey Station, Emily, Percy, and Gordon were waiting. Percy gasped. "Ooh, she looks magnificent," exclaimed Emily. And for the first time since she'd been on Sodor, Molly felt special. But not for long. A strong gust of wind blew one of the tarps into the air. "Oh no!" gasped Thomas. Now everyone could see there was nothing inside. "Those freight cars are empty," Gordon huffed. "I knew it couldn't be as important as the Express." "So there isn't a special?" Percy puffed sadly. Molly felt silly and not very important at all. So she puffed away as fast as she could. Thomas felt very bad. Just then, Sir Topham Hatt called the station master. And the station master came to see Thomas. "There are lots of engines waiting at the coaling plant," the station master said. They're waiting for Molly's freight cars. Oh no, moaned Thomas. I've got to find Molly quickly. Molly had stopped in a siding. She looked very sad. I'm sorry I made you look silly, puffed Thomas. But they are waiting for your empty freight cars at the coaling plant. But I've nearly run out of coal, moaned Molly. Don't worry, puffed Thomas. I can help you get there. So Thomas pushed and Molly pulled. Thomas and Molly worked together. And they arrived at the coaling plant in no time at all. There were lots of engines waiting for them. They all needed the empty freight cars to start their nighttime deliveries. Your empty freight cars were important after all, puffed Thomas. Molly felt so proud it made her axles tingle. We need even more freight cars, chuffed Henry. I'll get them, Molly chuffed cheerfully. And I'll help, puffed Thomas. Molly filled up with more coal, then Molly and Thomas raced back to the yard. They collected some more empty freight cars, and they puffed quickly away. Gordon was stopped at a junction. His signal had turned to red. Out of the way, puffed Molly. Empty freight cars coming through? You see, laughed Thomas. Sometimes empty freight cars are more important than your express. Gordon's face went as red as the signal. And Molly felt more special than special.
It was a moonlit night. Henry was taking a goods train to the station by the lake. Whenever that owl hoots, a mist rolls in, murmured Edward. There's a legend that when the mist's about, there's a ghost about too. Take care on the old line, Henry. Stupid bird, said Henry. Owls, mists, ghosts. Edward's going soft at the boiler. There's no mist. But Henry was wrong. What's that? Cried Henry. It's an amber lamp, murmured his driver. That means proceed with caution. Who's there? No one replied. Henry crept slowly forward. He stopped by a tree. It had a sign nailed to it, "Beware of the viaduct." The driver was surprised. No one warned us about that before. And look, the signal's red. And the gates are closed. And there's a fogman's coat. But where is its owner? Then they saw a light move within the station building. Ghosts! exclaimed Henry. Edward was right. Something very strange is happening, said his driver. I think it's best we go back. So do I, agreed Henry. By morning, the mist had cleared. A workman was talking about the unsafe viaduct. Lucky you didn't cross it last night. Yes, but we don't know who warned us, replied Henry's driver. Later that day, he spoke to Henry. The viaduct has been repaired. We can take our train back along the old line tonight. Henry really didn't want to. But when nightfall came, he was sizzling nicely. Suddenly, an owl hooted, and then Gordon thundered by. Oh, look, Henry's spooked, said a freight car. Be quiet, snapped Henry. I'm not scared. But he was. A little later, the fog came down. As they approached the same area,
they saw the amber light again. "Here we go," said Henry's driver. Then, unknown to Henry, the gates mysteriously closed by themselves, and the signal went red. The freight cars had seen everything, and they were spooked. "Faster, faster! There's a ghost about!" "Stop, stop!" yelled Henry. A mysterious figure watched Henry go by. Ahead was a landslide blocking the line. Henry braked hard, but the freight cars hit some of the rubble and plunged into the ravine. Just then, Henry's driver saw a strange sight coming towards them. "What's that?" he said. The fireman laughed. "That's our ghost. It's Old Bailey, the fogman." Old Bailey was very cross. "I tried to warn you about the viaduct. Why didn't you pay attention?" "We're sorry," replied the driver. "Is there anything we can do to thank you?" "I'd like to operate that old station. If you let me, I promise I won't spook Henry again." And in a little while, Old Bailey's wish was granted. "You and your station will be really useful," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Let's hear a hearty thank you to the friendliest, ghost on the island." Everyone cheered, especially Henry, who was the happiest of all.
Gordon is a beautiful blue engine with a great big boiler and a separate tender for his coal. Gordon's favorite job is to pull the express. One beautiful spring morning, Sir Topham Hatt came to see Gordon. "Today, Gordon, if you pull the express across the island and back again on time, then you will set a new Sodor record." Gordon was excited. He wanted to set a new record more than anything. Hooray for Gordon! All the engines tooted. Gordon steamed over to the coal depot. He rolled under a coal chute, and his tender was quickly filled. Gordon started puffing away when the yard manager called, "Stop, Gordon! You've been given Henry's special coal by mistake." Gordon knew that Henry needed special coal, but he thought Henry's coal would help him go faster. So he pretended not to hear. Henry had to take tar wagons to Knapford Station. He rolled his tender under the chute and waited for his coal. "I'm sorry, Henry," said the yard manager. "There's no special coal left. You'll have to use ordinary coal today." Henry was worried. Ordinary coal clogged his firebox and stopped him making steam. But he knew he had work to do. "It's only for one day," he said bravely. "I will try my very best." Gordon arrived at Knapford Station. His passengers boarded, and he happily set off right on time. Soon Gordon was chuffing as fast as he could. He didn't know if it was Henry's coal or the crisp, bright air. But today, it felt good to be Gordon. It didn't feel good to be Henry. Henry's tar wagons were very heavy, and Henry's engine didn't like the ordinary coal. Gordon steamed across the island. The record is mine! The record is mine! Henry was having a terrible time. He was rocking and rolling, coughing and wheezing. The workmen are waiting! The workmen are waiting! Thomas thought Henry looked very sick indeed. Gordon was making good time and feeling grand. Have you seen Henry? He looks very sick. I'm sure Henry is fine. But his face was as green as his tender. Now Gordon began to wish he hadn't taken Henry's coal, but he still wanted to set a new record. So when the signal changed, Gordon puffed on. But no matter how fast Gordon went, he couldn't get away from the bad feeling in his boiler. Gordon wasn't enjoying being Gordon anymore. Gordon had to stop to let off passengers. Henry was taking on water. Henry's face was green. His axles were shaking, and dark smoke billowed from his funnel. Are you feeling all right, Henry? I didn't get my special coal this morning. My firebox feels funny. But then it was time for Gordon to go. Hooray for Gordon! You'll set a new record for sure! Gordon could see Nafford Station up ahead. Sir Topham Hatt was there. Gordon was on time and going to set a new record. But Gordon's bad feeling was now so strong, he thought his boiler would burst. Gordon slowed to a halt. You're going to be late, cried his driver. I don't care, whistled Gordon. And Gordon started to reverse. Gordon soon reached Henry. Henry had stopped for a rest. He was surprised to see Gordon. I took your special coal this morning. I wanted to go faster than ever. I'm very sorry. But now, I have a good idea. Gordon and Henry swapped tenders. Soon, Henry's firebox was full of special coal. Henry felt better right away. Thank you, Gordon. And together, Gordon and Henry puffed off to Nafford Station. But Gordon and the express were late. Only Thomas was there. Sir Topham Hatt had gone home for his tea. I'm sorry you didn't set a new record today, Gordon. And I'm sorry I took your coal. Who holds the old record? Why, I do. And the good friends laughed.
All the engines on the island of Sodor love their work. But sometimes there is too much work. That's when Sir Topham Hatt brings new engines to the island. Salty, the dockyard diesel, is one of these engines. He loves to tell tales of the sea. We heaved until the old freighter finally caught the tide. It's good to be useful. Salty is excited about coming to the island of Sodor. Islands are surrounded by the sea. Salty loves the sea. Soon Salty arrived at his new job. Ahoy, mateys! Salty, pride of the seven seas. I'm a new diesel and I'm here to give you some help. Bill and Ben didn't think they needed any help, especially from a diesel. Welcome to Center Island Quarry, Mavis said proudly. Salty looked all around. Everywhere he looked, he saw nothing but rocks. A quarry, he cried. There must be some mistake. I'm a dockyard diesel. You're a quarry diesel now, Mavis said. And she explained that they had to complete an important job for Sir Topham Hatt. Salty was sad that he wouldn't be working by the sea, but he knew what it meant to be a really useful engine, and he set to work at once. Well, Salty said, at least there be trucks. You'd better mind them, Mavis said. They can be a bother. He won't last 5 minutes, said Bill. Those trucks will trip him up soon enough, said Ben. But to Bill and Ben's surprise, the truck seemed to give Salty no trouble at all. And the captain yawns. Yo-ho-ho, and a bucket of prawns, the tiller spins, sang Salty. And the captain yawns, sang the trucks. Thanks to Salty, Sir Topham Hatt's important job was almost done. Bill and Ben were surprised and a little jealous. Here comes Mr. Show-Off, groused Ben. You have to admit he's got a knack with those trucks, said Mavis. Driver says he'll bore the bolts off us with his stories, huffed Bill. But Salty didn't say a word. He didn't come near the shed. Mavis was worried. She rolled alongside and asked him what he was doing on his own. I thought I might catch a bit of sea breeze. You really do miss the sea, don't you? Asked Mavis. Aye, said Salty. I do. But Salty knew the quarry work was important. The next day, he tried to show Bill and Ben his secret with the trucks. I like working to a musical rhythm, he said. And so do the trucks. Why don't you give it a try, me hearties? Here we go, here we go, here we go. No we don't, no we don't, no we don't. But try as they might, Bill and Ben could not move the trucks the way Salty could. Later that day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the quarry. He was surprised to see the job had been completed. Well done, said Sir Topham Hatt. It was Salty, said Mavis. We couldn't have done it without him. Then I've got a bigger job for you, Salty. Aye, aye, sir. What kind of quarry is it? Quarry, said Sir Topham Hatt. I'm sending you to Brendam Docks. The docks, Salty exclaimed. The docks are hard by the sea. Oh, thank you, sir, he said. This reminds me of a time in Bimini. And Salty was telling stories again. Salty loves Brendam Docks. He gets more work done than any 3 engines and feels really useful. And only the trucks know his secrets. The tiller spins and the captain yawns.